The old church bell rang out at exactly 3 in the morning, waking half the town of Riverbrook. Just one deep echoing toll that cut through the quiet night. Then silence again. B. Wilson pulled her blanket tighter and stared at the red numbers on her bedside clock. 3:01 a.m., third night in a row. She wasn't the only one who noticed either. There it goes again, her husband Tom grumbled beside her, rolling over and pulling the pillow over his head. Someone needs to talk to Pastor Richards about that bell. The funny thing was, no one was supposed to be ringing that bell at all. St. Augustine's Church stood on the hill overlooking their small coastal town, its stone walls weathered by over 200 years of sea air. The bell tower had been declared unsafe more than a year ago, roped off with yellow caution tape. The ringing mechanism disconnected after a building inspection. Yet every night at 3 a.m. for the past 3 weeks, that single toll broke the silence. By day 4, the town's social media pages were buzzing. The coffee shop on Main Street was filled with tired, irritable people trading theories. Bea sat at her usual corner table listening as she graded papers from her high school history class. "It's just kids playing pranks," said Pete from the hardware store, stirring his coffee with more force than necessary. "Someone needs to stake out the place." "My cousin works for the sheriff," a woman at the next table chimed in. "They've already checked twice. Nobody there, doors all locked up tight." "Then who's ringing the bell?" asked Mrs. Lee, the retired librarian. "Ghosts?" She chuckled, but nobody joined her. The door swung open, letting in a gust of chilly October air along with Olivia Walsh. At 35, Olivia was the town's unofficial historian, running the small museum next to the library and giving walking tours to the few tourists who found their way to Riverbrook. Her curly hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she carried a stack of old leather-bound books. She dropped into the chair across from Bea, her eyes bright with excitement despite the dark circles underneath them. "Have you heard about the bell?" Bea asked, already knowing the answer. "I've been researching all night," Olivia replied, patting her stack of books. "Did you know St. Augustine's was built in 1792, right after a terrible storm wiped out the original settlement? The church records say the bell was donated by a group of merchants who survived the disaster." Bea smiled at her friend's enthusiasm. "Fascinating, but it doesn't explain why it's ringing by itself in the middle of the night." "That's just it." Olivia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "According to these old journals, this isn't the first time. There are accounts from 1843, 1897, and 1954 of the bell ringing on its own, always at 3 a.m., always for a few weeks at a time." A chill ran down Bea's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. "What happened those other times?" Olivia flipped open one of the books, pointing to a yellowed page filled with cramped handwriting. "That's the strange part. Each time it stopped after someone investigated the church crypt. Later that afternoon, Bea found herself walking up the winding path to St. Augustine's, pulled by curiosity she couldn't explain. The church stood stark against the darkening sky, its stone walls tinged golden by the setting sun. Wind rustled through the old oak trees surrounding the churchyard, their branches nearly bare now, leaves crunching underfoot. Pastor Richards was sweeping fallen leaves from the church steps when she arrived. In his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he'd been leading the congregation for as long as Bea could remember. "Ah, Mrs. Wilson," he greeted her, leaning on his broom. "Let me guess. You're here about the bell?" "The whole town's talking about it," Bea admitted. "Is there any explanation?" The pastor sighed, looking up at the bell tower. Yellow caution tape still fluttered from its entrance. "None that makes sense. I've checked the tower myself, well, as far as I could safely go. The ringing mechanism was disconnected after the inspection. There's no timer, no electronics that could malfunction. What about—" Bea hesitated, feeling foolish. "What about the crypt?" Pastor Richards gave her a sharp look. "What about it?" Bea explained what Olivia had found in the old records. The pastor listened quietly, his expression growing more troubled. "The crypt hasn't been opened in decades," he said finally. "After the last burial in the 1960s, it was sealed for safety reasons. Too much water damage from being so close to the shore. But if it might stop the bell, I'm not sure disturbing the dead based on old superstitions is the answer. Mrs. Wilson." The conversation might have ended there if not for what happened next. A loud crash came from inside the church, like something heavy falling over. Pastor Richards turned quickly, fumbling with his keys. "Wait here," he said, but Bee followed him anyway. Inside, the church was dim and cool, smelling of old wood and candle wax. They found nothing out of place in the main sanctuary. Just late afternoon shadows stretching across empty pews. It sounded like it came from below, Bee said quietly. Pastor Richards nodded reluctantly and led her to a small door near the altar. It opened to reveal worn stone steps descending into darkness. He flicked a switch and a single bare bulb cast weak yellow light down the stairwell. "This leads to the old storage rooms," he explained. "The crypt entrance is down there too, but like I said, it's been sealed up." They made their way carefully down the steps. The air grew colder and damp with each step, the walls changing from plaster to rough stone. At the bottom, a narrow hallway stretched before them, lined with metal shelves holding boxes of Christmas decorations, hymnals, and church records. "I don't see anything that could have fallen," Pastor Richard said, peering around. Bee was about to suggest they go back up when she noticed something on the floor, a fine layer of dust disturbed by what looked like footprints. Not their own, which were clearly visible behind them, but another set that seemed to appear from nowhere in the middle of the hallway and led to the far end. "Pastor," she whispered, pointing. He saw them too, his face paling slightly in the dim light. Together they followed the mysterious footprints to where they ended at a wall of solid stone blocks, the sealed entrance to the crypt, or what should have been solid. As they got closer, Bee noticed a thin line running down the center of the wall as if the stones didn't quite meet. Pastor Richards reached out hesitantly and pressed his hand against the wall. To their shock, it moved slightly. "That's impossible," he breathed. This was sealed with mortar and stone over 50 years ago. Yet the evidence was right in front of them. Someone or something had broken the seal. The footprints led right to it, though strangely none led away. "We should call someone," Bee suggested, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. "The police, maybe?" Pastor Richards nodded slowly, unable to take his eyes off the disturbed wall. "Yes, I think that would be best." That evening, as darkness fell over Riverbrook, word spread quickly that something had been discovered beneath the church. Police Chief Huang arrived with 2 deputies, followed shortly by Olivia clutching her research books and Dr. Chen, who taught geology at the community college and knew something about old structures. They gathered in Pastor Richard's office while he made phone calls to church officials, seeking permission to properly open the crypt for investigation. "The diocese wants documentation," the pastor explained, hanging up the phone. "Photos, official witnesses. They're sending someone tomorrow, but we're authorized to take a preliminary look tonight given the circumstances." Tonight? Bee hadn't planned on being part of whatever happened next. Olivia grabbed her arm excitedly. "Don't you want to know? After 3 weeks of that bell waking everyone up?" Chief Huang checked his watch. "It's only 8 p.m. now. We have plenty of time before the usual occurrence." And so at 11 p.m., Bee found herself back at St. Augustine's, part of a small group preparing to enter the church crypt. Flashlights, cameras, even small tools had been gathered. Pastor Richards led a brief prayer before they descended the stone steps once more. This time with proper lighting and equipment. The sealed crypt entrance was carefully examined. Dr. Chen confirmed what they had suspected. The mortar between the stones had been broken recently, creating a gap just wide enough for someone to squeeze through. But who would do this? Chief Huang wondered aloud, examining the edges with a gloved hand. "And why leave through a different exit? We've checked the entire church. With everyone watching, the police carefully removed enough stones to create an opening. Cool." Stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of old stone and something else Bee couldn't identify. Chief Huang went first, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The others followed one by one, Pastor Richards bringing up the rear, his expression a mixture of concern and reluctance. The crypt beyond was larger than Bee had imagined, a vaulted chamber with stone burial niches lining the walls. Their flashlights revealed names and dates carved into plaques, some so worn with age they were barely legible. Dust covered everything, except for a clear path through the center of the room leading to the far wall. "Look at this," Olivia whispered, pointing her light at the footprints. "They just stop. Right at this wall." And indeed they did, as if whoever, or whatever, had made them had simply walked through solid stone. Dr. Chen ran her hands over the wall carefully. "There's something different about these stones. The pattern doesn't match the rest of the crypt." As they all gathered closer, a distant church bell began to chime the midnight hour. The sound seemed to vibrate through the stone around them, and Bee couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. No one noticed the small trickle of water beginning to seep through the cracks in the corner, nor the faint marking that began to glow with each toll of the distant bell. The last echoes of the midnight bell faded into silence. Bee shivered despite her heavy jacket, watching as Dr. Chen pressed her fingers against the odd section of wall. "This wasn't part of the original construction," Dr. Chen said, tracing the edges of the stonework. "See how the mortar pattern differs? This was added later." Chief Huang directed his flashlight beam along the seam where the wall met the floor. "And look here, scuff marks. Recent ones." Olivia already had her notebook out, scribbling furiously while balancing her flashlight awkwardly under her arm. The town records mention renovations to the church in 1843, right after the first reports of the mysterious bell ringing. They could have added this wall then. Pastor Richards cleared his throat nervously. "I'm not sure we should disturb anything further. We have permission to investigate, not to damage church property." "With all due respect, Pastor," Chief Huang said, "someone's already been down here disturbing things. Those footprints didn't appear by magic." The small group fell silent, the weight of their discovery settling around them like the dust they'd disturbed. The only sound was the soft drip of water from somewhere in the darkness. "Wait," Bee said suddenly. "Do you hear that?" They all went still, listening. The dripping seemed to have a pattern to it. Not the random patter of leaking groundwater, but something more rhythmic. Drip, drip, drip. "It's coming from behind the wall," Dr. Chen said, pressing her ear against the stone. Chief Huang made a decision. "Pastor, I think we need to look behind this wall. If there's water damage, it could be affecting the structural integrity of the entire church." It was the right argument to make. Pastor Richards nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but please be careful. This is still consecrated ground." With careful precision, they examined the unusual section of wall until Dr. Chen discovered what looked like a small indentation near one edge. When pressed, something clicked inside the stone, and a section of the wall swung inward with surprising ease, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. The air that rushed out was cold and damp, carrying a faint mineral smell like sea caves. Their flashlight beams cut through darkness that seemed thicker somehow, more absolute than the darkness of the crypt behind them. "A hidden passage," Olivia whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and excitement, just like in the journal from 1897. They found something during repairs but sealed it up again without explanation. Chief Huang held up a hand, urging caution. "I'll go first. Stay close together." The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. The walls were rough-hewn stone, glistening with moisture, and the floor sloped gently downward. Bee tried not to think about how far below the church they must be now, or how much earth and stone loomed above their heads. After about 30 feet, the passage opened into a small chamber that drew gasps from everyone. Unlike the rough passage, this room had been carefully constructed, its walls lined with smooth stones bearing strange symbols carved into their surfaces. A stone table stood in the center, and on it rested what appeared to be an elaborate mechanical device, connected to a system of ropes and pulleys that disappeared into a narrow shaft in the ceiling. "This goes all the way up to the bell tower," Chief Huang said, shining his light upward. "Some kind of alternative ringing mechanism." Dr. Chen approached the device cautiously. "It's ingenious. Look at the gears and counterweights. This isn't just some simple pulley system." Olivia was already examining the symbols on the walls. "I've seen these before in the Historical Society archives. They're similar to markings used by a group that operated in this area in the late 1700s. They called themselves the Tidal Guardians." "Tidal Guardians?" Bee repeated. "A secret society of sorts. They formed right after the Great Storm that destroyed the original settlement. Local legend says they discovered something in the sea caves along the coast, something that changed them." Pastor Richards frowned. "That sounds rather ominous." "Maybe, maybe not," Olivia replied. "The records are fragmentary at best, but they were respected members of the community, merchants, shipbuilders, the founding families of Riverbrook. Whatever they were guarding, they took it seriously enough to build this." She gestured at the room around them. Chief Huang had moved to examine a small alcove in one corner of the chamber. "There's something else here. Looks like books." Indeed, tucked away in a stone niche protected from the worst of the dampness were several leather-bound journals. their covers stained with age but still intact. Beside them sat a brass container sealed with wax. With careful hands, Olivia lifted one of the journals and gently opened it. Inside were pages of handwritten text, much of it in some kind of code or cipher, interspersed with diagrams of the mechanical device and what appeared to be tide charts. "This is incredible," she murmured. "A primary source document from the tidal guardians themselves." Dr. Chen had turned her attention to the mechanical device. "This is still active," she said with surprise. "Look at these gears, they're not rusted through. And this part here seems to be connected to... Is that a water gauge?" She pointed to a glass tube mounted on one side of the device, partially filled with water. Faint markings etched into the glass indicated various levels. "It's measuring something," Chief Huang agreed. "But what? And how is it still functioning after all these years?" B had been quietly observing, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Something about the regular dripping sound had been nagging at her. She followed it to its source, a small basin carved into the floor beneath another thin pipe that came through the wall. "I think I understand," she said slowly. "This room is connected to the sea cave somehow. The water level in this tube rises and falls with the tide." Dr. Chen joined her, examining the basin and pipe. "You're right. And look at how it connects to the device. When the water reaches a certain level, it triggers the mechanism which pulls the rope, which rings the bell," Olivia finished. "But why would they build such an elaborate system just to ring a bell at high tide?" Not just any high tide, Bea realized, looking at the markings on the gauge. A specific height. And based on these symbols, she pointed to markings next to the highest line on the gauge. It only happens at certain times. Chief Huang checked his watch. It's nearly 1 a.m. The bell has been ringing at 3 a.m. for the past few weeks. That gives us 2 hours to figure this out. They divided the tasks among themselves. Olivia carefully photographed the journals before attempting to decipher their contents. Dr. Chen examined the mechanical device in detail, trying to understand its operation. Pastor Richards and Chief Huang inspected the rest of the chamber for any other clues, while Bea studied the symbols on the walls, comparing them to pictures on Olivia's phone of similar markings from the historical archives. As they worked, the water in the gauge rose slowly but steadily. "I think I've got something," Olivia announced after about an hour. "This journal entry from 1792, right after the church was built. It says the mechanism is complete. When the tide reaches the critical point, the bell will sound, creating the resonance that keeps the tidal one dormant for another cycle." "The tidal one?" Pastor Richards repeated with concern. "What does that mean?" Olivia flipped through more pages. It's mentioned several times but never clearly explained. They refer to it as something they discovered in the caves after the Great Storm, something that responds to certain sounds or vibrations. "Like the church bell," Bea suggested. "Exactly. And look at this passage. When Brother Franklin suggested we simply destroy what we found, Elder Thompson reminded us of the consequences witnessed during the spring tide, when the entire Dawson family was lost to the influence. No, it cannot be destroyed, only contained." A heavy silence fell over the group. "Contained," Chief Huang repeated quietly. "They built the church to contain something." Dr. Chen had been listening while continuing to examine the mechanism. "The water level is rising faster now," she noted. "We're approaching high tide. And look at this component, it's been recently cleaned and oiled. Someone has been maintaining this device, but who?" Bea wondered. "And why all the secrecy?" Olivia had moved on to a later journal. "Here's something from 1843. The line is unbroken, though our numbers dwindle. The new rector knows nothing of what lies beneath his church, nor should he. The fewer who carry this burden, the better. When my time comes, young William will take my place as keeper." "A secret passed down through generations," Pastor Richards murmured. "But apparently the line was broken at some point, if no one knew about this place until now." Chief Huang's flashlight beam caught something on the far wall, a list of names carved into the stone, dates beside each one. The most recent date was 1962. Harold Fletcher, the chief read. "That would be old Harry Fletcher, the bell ringer who died back in the 60s. My father used to talk about him." "The last keeper," Olivia said softly. "After he died, there was no one left who knew the secret." "Until 3 weeks ago," Bea added, "when someone found this place and started the mechanism working again." "But why?" Dr. Chen had been checking the water gauge regularly. "The water's almost at the trigger point," she announced. "Less than an hour until it reaches the line marked with the symbol for 3. Olivia had opened the brass container they'd found with the journals. Inside was a small key and a folded paper with more of the strange symbols. "I think this is some kind of instruction," she said, comparing the symbols to those in the journal. "Something about adjusting the mechanism for the changing tides." "Changing tides?" Pastor Richards asked. "Tidal patterns shift over time," Dr. Chen explained. "And with recent climate changes, sea levels are rising. The tides today aren't the same as they were 100 years ago. So someone found this place," Chief Huang summarized, "realized the mechanism needed adjustment to work properly with current tidal patterns and started it up again." "But who and why now?" As if in answer to his question, they heard a new sound from the passage they'd entered through. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching the chamber. Everyone froze, flashlights directed toward the doorway. A figure appeared in the entrance, silhouetted against the darkness of the tunnel. Elderly, stooped, but with eyes that were sharp and alert as they took in the group of intruders. "You weren't supposed to find this place," the old man said, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. "Not yet, but perhaps it's just as well. We're running out of time." The old man stepped fully into the chamber, the beam of Chief Huang's flashlight revealing a weathered face with deep-set eyes. He wore a simple gray sweater and work pants, looking more like a handyman than a keeper of ancient secrets. "Mr. Cooper?" Pastor Richards said in disbelief. "Walter Cooper?" The old man nodded slowly. "Been maintaining the church grounds for 30 years now. Though there's parts of my job the church committee don't know about." Chief Huang lowered his flashlight slightly but remained alert. "You've been coming down here? Activating this bell mechanism?" "For the past 3 weeks, yes." Cooper moved further into the room, his eyes drawn to the water gauge. "It's rising faster than expected. The storm offshore is pushing the tide higher. You know how this works?" Dr. Chen asked, gesturing to the complex mechanism. Cooper nodded. "My grandfather showed me this place when I was just a boy. He wasn't supposed to. The knowledge was meant to be passed only to a chosen keeper. But he had no suitable candidates, and he feared what would happen if the knowledge was lost." "Your grandfather," Olivia said, checking the list of names carved into the wall. "Was he Robert Cooper? The church caretaker in the 1950s. "That's right. He learned from old Harry Fletcher, who's the last name on your list there. When Harry realized he was dying, he broke the rules and taught my grandfather the secrets." Cooper moved to the mechanism, checking it with practiced hands. The official line of keepers ended with Harry, but the knowledge survived. "But you haven't been maintaining this regularly," Dr. Chen observed. "Some of these components show years of disuse." Cooper's shoulders sagged slightly. "I'm ashamed to say I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. My grandfather told me the stories, showed me how it worked, but it all seemed like superstition. I checked it every few years, made sure nothing had collapsed, but I didn't keep it running." He looked around at their faces. "Until the dream started." A heavy silence filled the chamber. "Dreams?" B finally asked. 3 weeks ago. Dreams of the sea, of something rising with the tide. Dreams so real I could taste the salt water." Cooper shuddered slightly at the memory. "My grandfather described the same dreams. He said they were a warning. When the keepers stopped ringing the bell in the old days, the dreams would come first. Then worse things would follow." Olivia held up one of the journals. "These mention dreams too. And something called the tidal one. What is it, Mr. Cooper?" The old man's gaze dropped to the floor. "I don't rightly know. Not fully. The keepers never wrote down its true nature, thought it was safer that way. But it's something old, something that lives deep in the sea caves beneath us, something that influences people's minds when the conditions are right." "Influences how?" Chief Huang asked sharply. "Different ways. Makes them hear things, see things, makes them do things they wouldn't normally do." Cooper gestured to the mechanism. "That's what this is for. When the tide reaches a certain height, the water pressure activates this device which rings the bell. The sound disrupts its influence somehow." Dr. Chen had been examining the water gauge with growing concern. "And the critical tide height is coming at 3 a.m. tonight?" "Yes," Cooper confirmed. "Has been for the past 3 weeks due to the unusual tide patterns this year. That's why I started the mechanism again. But it's not working right, the timing is off. It's ringing, but not exactly when it should. The calibration needs adjustment for modern tide levels. B was trying to make sense of it all. So you've been coming down here each night to manually trigger it at exactly 3 a.m.? Cooper nodded. Been sneaking in through the old tunnel that connects to the boathouse by the harbor. The church doors are locked, but the keepers always had their own way in. And tonight, Pastor Richards asked, I came to make the final adjustments. This brass key, he pointed to the one Olivia had found in the container. It's for fine-tuning the mechanism. With the right adjustments, it should ring automatically at exactly the right moment, without anyone needed to trigger it manually. Chief Huang's expression remained skeptical. Mr. Cooper, this sounds crazy, I know, the old man finished for him. I thought so too until I felt it myself. 3 weeks ago, I was down at the harbor late, checking my fishing boat. When the tide came in, I felt something, like whispers in my head pulling me toward the water. If my phone hadn't rung, snapping me out of it. He shook his head. I ran straight to the church, found this place exactly as my grandfather had described it, and started the mechanism that very night. Olivia was flipping through journal pages rapidly. Here, 1897, March 15th. The dreams have returned. The mechanism had fallen out of alignment due to the shifting of the building's foundation. 3 townspeople walked into the sea before we could correct it. The influence grows stronger each time. Dr. Chen checked her watch. It's nearly 2 a.m. If the critical tide is at 3, we don't have much time to verify all this and make adjustments. Cooper nodded gravely. The old journals say it peaks exactly at 3:01 a.m. That's when the bell must ring to break the influence. Chief Huang made a decision. All right, Dr. Chen, you and Mr. Cooper work on the mechanism. Make sure it's properly calibrated. Pastor Richards, you and I will check the bell tower. Make sure nothing is blocking the bell from ringing properly. Olivia, keep working on those journals. Find anything else that might help us understand what we're dealing with. B, stay with Olivia, help her organize what she finds. As they split into their assigned tasks, B felt a subtle change in the air pressure, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. The dripping sound had increased, water now flowing steadily through the pipe into the basin. The tide's rising faster, Cooper observed worriedly. The storm must be getting closer to shore. Dr. Chen examined the mechanism closely, Cooper pointing out the various components and explaining their function. Together, they began making careful adjustments, using the brass key to calibrate the timing mechanism. Meanwhile, Olivia and B pored over the journals, organizing the information chronologically. Look at this, B said, pointing to an entry from 1876. They mention a resonance chamber built into the foundation of the church, designed to amplify the bell's sound in the direction of the sea caves. Olivia nodded excitedly. And here, from 1901, the bell's frequency has been precisely tuned to create a counter-vibrational effect. The tidal one cannot extend its influence when this specific tone disrupts the water medium through which it projects. So it's science, not superstition, B mused. Sound waves disrupting whatever this tidal one uses to affect people's minds. Maybe both, Olivia suggested. The journals talk about the founders discovering the tidal one after a terrible storm, the same storm that destroyed the original settlement. What if they encountered something during that disaster, something that affected their minds, and they built this entire church as a kind of containment system? Their conversation was interrupted by a crackling sound from Chief Huang's radio. The chief had reached the bell tower and was reporting back. There's definitely been someone up here, his voice came through with static. There's a makeshift platform rigged to reach the bell without stepping on the unsafe flooring. Looks like Mr. Cooper's work. Dr. Chen called up from her position by the mechanism. The calibration is almost complete, but we're cutting it close. The water level is rising rapidly. Outside, the wind had picked up, driving rain against the church windows. The storm was moving in faster than predicted, pushing the tide before it. B suddenly noticed something in one of the oldest journals, a hand-drawn map showing the church in relation to the coastline and a series of sea caves. Olivia, look at this. These caves extend directly beneath us. Olivia studied the map with growing concern. And according to this note, at extreme high tides, the innermost cave is completely submerged, which means whatever is down there would be in direct contact with the seawater. B trailed off as a realization hit her. The rising sea levels. Climate change. If the tidal one's influence works through water and the sea level is higher now than when this system was built, It might explain why the dream started coming back, Olivia finished. The old calibration wouldn't work anymore. A low rumble shook the chamber, dust sifting down from the ceiling. At first, Bea thought it was thunder from the storm above, but then she saw the concern on Cooper's face. That wasn't thunder, the old man said quietly. Dr. Chen checked the water gauge. The level's almost at the critical mark, but it's still 20 minutes until 3 a.m. The storm is accelerating everything, Cooper said. We need to manually trigger the bell now, then hope the adjusted mechanism works properly at 3. Another rumble, stronger this time, shook the chamber. Small stones dislodged from the ceiling, pattering around them. That's coming from below us, not above, Dr. Chen said, her voice tense. Cooper was already moving to a rope that extended up through the ceiling. This is the manual override. It connects directly to the bell. Before he could reach it, the entire chamber shook violently. A crack appeared in the floor. Water seeping up through it. Not the clean seawater they might have expected, but something darker, with a faint luminescent quality that cast eerie shadows across the walls. And with the water came something else. A sensation that pressed against Bea's mind like a physical force. Whispers just below the threshold of hearing. Images flickering at the edges of her vision. The sea calling her. Depths, waiting to embrace her. It's happening, Cooper gasped, fighting his way toward the rope. The tidal one is awakening early. We need to ring that bell now. The luminescent water seeped faster through the crack in the floor, spreading in tendrils like searching fingers. Cooper stumbled, nearly falling as another tremor shook the chamber, but he caught himself against the wall and continued his desperate lunge for the rope. Don't listen to it, he shouted over the rumbling. Whatever you hear in your head, ignore it. Bea could feel it clearly now. A pull, a whisper like the sweetest voice she'd ever heard calling her name. Images flashed through her mind. Cool water embracing her, secrets waiting in the depths, knowledge beyond imagining. All she had to do was walk toward the harbor, wade into the waves. She shook her head violently, forcing the thoughts away. Across the chamber, she saw Olivia blinking rapidly, her hands pressed against her temples. Dr. Chen had frozen in place, staring at the glowing water with an expression of wonder and longing. Chen, Bea called sharply. Dr. Chen, stay with us. The geologist snapped back to awareness with visible effort. It's trying to get in my head, she gasped. Cooper had reached the rope and was pulling with all his strength, but age had taken its toll on his once powerful shoulders. I can't. It's too stiff, he panted. Years without use. Chief Huang's voice crackled over the radio, distorted and breaking up. Oi, tower shaking. Bell mechanism. Something wrong. Pastor Richards's voice came through next, even more broken and distant. Can see lights, harbor. People walking. Bea felt ice form in her stomach. People are being drawn to the water already, she said. The influence is spreading, Cooper nodded grimly. Always starts with those closest to the shore or those most susceptible. Another violent tremor sent more chunks of ceiling crashing down. The crack in the floor widened, the glowing water bubbling up more forcefully now, and with it came a sound, not heard with ears but felt in bones and teeth and the pit of the stomach. A deep rhythmic pulsing like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. We need more strength on this rope, Cooper called out. Chief Huang appeared in the doorway, his uniform soaked from the rain outside, his face pale. Pastor Richards is trying to keep people away from the harbor. They're walking right into the storm surf like sleepwalkers. He rushed to Cooper's side, adding his strength to the rope. The old pulley system groaned in protest as the two men heaved, but something was still jammed. Dr. Chen had snapped fully back to her scientific mindset, examining the mechanism with desperate focus. The calibration is complete, but it won't matter if we can't get the bell to ring manually first. We need to break whatever influence is building before 3 a.m. Olivia had her phone out, scrolling frantically through her photos of the journal pages. There must be something here, some emergency measure they planned for. Bea felt the whispering in her mind growing stronger, accompanied now by flashes of anger, as if whatever was reaching out through the water knew they were trying to stop it and was fighting back. The glowing liquid had formed a puddle nearly a foot wide, pulsing with its own inner light. She found herself staring at it, mesmerized by the patterns swirling within the glow. So beautiful, so complex, like a language written in light. Bea, Olivia's voice snapped her back. Her friend was holding up her phone, pointing to a particular journal entry with shaking fingers. Look at this from 1823. In case of emergency, when the mechanism fails, the reserve chamber in the north wall contains the pure tone. The north wall? Bea repeated, fighting to keep her thoughts clear. They both turned to the wall opposite the entrance. There, partially hidden behind years of dust and cobwebs, was a small iron door set into the stone. Chief Huang and Cooper were still struggling with the rope, making painfully slow progress. The bell had to ring soon or it would be too late. Bea and Olivia rushed to the iron door, pulling away the cobwebs. A simple latch held it closed, stiff but not locked. With effort, they pulled it open to reveal a small cavity in the wall. Inside sat a crystal bowl and what looked like a solid quartz rod. "What is it?" Bea asked as Olivia carefully lifted out the items. "A singing bowl," Olivia whispered. "My grandmother had one from Tibet. They produce tones when played correctly." She set the crystal bowl on the stone table, her hands trembling slightly. "But I don't know if I can make it work." Dr. Chen joined them, her eyes widening in recognition. "I've used these before. The frequency depends on the size and thickness of the crystal." She took the quartz rod from Olivia. "If the keepers created this as a backup, it must produce the same frequency as the church bell." Another violent tremor rocked the chamber. The crack in the floor was now several inches wide, the glowing water rising steadily. The whispers in Bea's mind had become a chorus, dozens of voices calling, promising, threatening. Above them, they heard Chief Huang curse as the rope slipped from his grasp. "It's no use. Something's blocking the mechanism." Dr. Chen positioned the crystal bowl carefully and gripped the quartz rod. "Everyone cover your ears," she warned. "These can produce extremely powerful tones." She began to run the rod around the rim of the bowl, applying pressure with practiced movements. At first nothing happened beyond a faint glass-like squeak, but as she continued finding the right speed and pressure, the bowl began to sing, a clear, pure note that rose in volume until it filled the chamber. The effect on the glowing water was immediate and dramatic. The luminescence flickered, the tendrils withdrawing slightly as if in pain. The whispers in Bea's mind faltered, creating a moment of blessed clarity. "It's working," Cooper shouted over the tone. "But it won't be enough. The bowl is just a temporary measure. We need the bell." Dr. Chen maintained her steady movement around the bowl's rim, the tone unwavering. "I can keep this going, but not for long." The energy required, Chief Huang had moved to examine the pulley system more closely. "There's something jamming the mechanism up near the ceiling. I need to climb up and clear it." "No time," Cooper said, checking his watch. "It's 2:47. We have 14 minutes until the critical moment." Another tremor, the strongest yet, sent more of the ceiling crashing down. A large stone struck the edge of the table, nearly toppling the crystal bowl. Dr. Chen caught it just in time, but the tone faltered momentarily. In that brief silence, the whispers rushed back with renewed force, accompanied by a surge of the glowing water. "We need to get out of here," Chief Huang decided. "This whole chamber could collapse. We'll head to the bell tower directly, ring it manually from there." Dr. Chen carefully lifted the still-singing bowl. "I'll keep this going as we move." Cooper shook his head firmly. "You four go. I'll stay with the mechanism, try one more approach." "That's not happening," Chief Huang said. "We all go." "No time to argue," the old man insisted. "I've lived with this responsibility for decades, ignored it too long. This is my duty." He turned to the mechanism, pulling a small tool from his pocket. "There's a release valve I can try. Might create enough pressure to force the bell rope free." Bea could see the determination in his weathered face. "Mr. Cooper, go," he ordered. "Get to the bell tower. If I fail, you'll need to ring it manually at exactly 3:01, not a second before or after." Another violent shake decided the matter as part of the passage they'd entered through collapsed, sending dust billowing into the chamber. "This way," Cooper pointed to a narrow staircase cut into the far corner of the room, previously hidden in the shadows. "Emergency exit. Leads up to the church basement. Now go." Chief Huang hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. "Be careful, Cooper." "Haven't been careful a day in my life," the old man replied with a grim smile. "Too late to start now." They hurried to the staircase, Dr. Chen carefully balancing the singing bowl as they climbed. The crystal's tone continued to fight back the influence, but Bea could feel it weakening as they ascended, distance diminishing its power. The stairs were steep and narrow, the stone worn smooth by generations of secret keepers. They emerged through a cleverly disguised panel in the church basement. Just as another tremor shook the building, the tower, Chief Huang reminded them, leading the way up to the main floor of the church. They raced through the empty sanctuary, the stained glass windows rattling in their frames as wind and rain lashed against them. Outside, the storm had reached frightening intensity, lightning flashing almost continuously. Pastor Richards burst through the main doors, drenched and panting. "People are still heading to the harbor," he gasped. "I couldn't stop them all. It's like they're sleepwalking. The police are trying to hold them back, but they're fighting to get to the water." "How many?" Chief Huang demanded. "At least 20, maybe more. And the tide. It's higher than I've ever seen it. Flooding the lower streets already." The tone from the crystal bowl was fading, Dr. Chen's arms tiring from the continuous motion required to maintain it. "I can't keep this up much longer," she managed between labored breaths. "The bell tower," B insisted. "We need to hurry." They made their way to the tower entrance, still wrapped in caution tape from the safety inspection. Chief Huang tore it away and pulled open the door, revealing the winding staircase within. "Be extremely careful," he warned. The floor was declared unstable for a reason. They climbed single file, the wooden steps creaking ominously beneath their weight. The air grew colder as they ascended, wind howling through gaps in the old stones. Finally, they reached the bell chamber, a circular room near the top of the tower where the massive bronze bell hung from ancient oak beams. It was larger than B had imagined, easily 4 feet across, green with age, but still solid and imposing. The makeshift platform Cooper had built was visible below it, a careful arrangement of boards and supports that distributed weight away from the weakened sections of floor. Chief Huang checked his watch. 2:56, 5 minutes until the critical moment. Another violent tremor shook the tower, stronger than any before. Through the open arches of the bell chamber, B could see the harbor in the distance, illuminated by flashes of lightning. The tide had risen far beyond normal levels, waves crashing over the seawall, and there at the water's edge were dark figures, townspeople drawn by the influence wading into the churning surf. "We have to ring it now," Pastor Richards cried. "Not yet," Olivia cautioned, consulting the journal pages on her phone. Cooper said 3:01 exactly. "Too early and it won't break the influence." The crystal bowl's tone had faded to almost nothing, Dr. Chen's strength exhausted. As its sound died away, B felt the whispers return to her mind stronger than ever. Looking at her companions' faces, she could see they felt it too, that powerful, irresistible call. "Fight it," she urged them. Just a few more minutes. A tremendous boom echoed from beneath them, shaking the entire church to its foundations. The floor of the bell chamber shifted, boards creaking and nails popping. "What was that?" Pastor Richards gasped. "Cooper," Chief Huang said grimly. "Must have tried something desperate." B made her way carefully to one of the arched openings, looking down toward the harbor. What she saw made her blood run cold. The water had begun to glow with the same eerie luminescence they'd seen in the chamber below. But now it covered the entire harbor, pulsing with that same rhythmic pattern, and the people at the water's edge had stopped moving forward. They stood perfectly still, knee-deep in the glowing surf, their faces upturned to the storm as if listening to something only they could hear. "Look at the water," she called to the others. They joined her at the opening, watching in horror as the glowing tide continued to rise. But there was something else now, a pattern forming in the center of the harbor, the water swirling into a massive, slowly rotating spiral. "It's nearly time," Olivia whispered, checking her phone. "Just 1 more minute." The bell rope hung before them, ancient hemp frayed but still strong enough for its purpose. Chief Huang took hold of it, bracing himself. "On my mark," he said, eyes fixed on his watch. The seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness. The whispers in B's mind had become a roar, images flooding her consciousness, the depths, the knowledge, the power waiting below. It took every ounce of her willpower to remain standing in the bell tower, to not rush down the stairs and out to join those standing in the glowing water. 10 seconds, Chief Huang announced, his voice strained with the effort of resistance. The spiral in the harbor had grown, its center becoming a depression in the water as if something massive was rising from below. 5 seconds. The tower shook again. Beneath their feet, a beam cracked ominously. "Now!" Chief Huang pulled the rope with all his strength. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The rope went taut, but the bell didn't move. Then, with a groan of old metal, the massive bronze bell began to swing. The first toll rang out across Riverbrook, its deep resonance cutting through the howling storm. The sound was different from the single, muted tolls of previous nights. Fuller, richer, vibrating through the stones of the tower and into their bones. Bee felt the effect immediately. The whispers in her mind stuttered, their grip weakening as the sound waves rippled outward. Through the tower's opening, she watched the people standing in the harbor water. They stirred as if waking from a deep sleep, confusion replacing the blank expressions on their faces. "It's working," she cried. Chief Huang continued pulling the rope rhythmically, sending toll after toll echoing across the town. Each ring seemed to strengthen the effect, pushing back against the influence that had been growing for weeks. But something was happening in the harbor. The glowing spiral hadn't disappeared. Instead, it grew more defined, spinning faster as the center continued to sink lower, forming a whirlpool of luminescent water. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating a sight that stole the breath from Bee's lungs. Rising from the center of the whirlpool was what looked like a massive pillar of water. But unlike any natural waterspout, it moved with purpose, twisting and reshaping itself as it rose higher. Within its translucent form, patterns of light shifted and pulsed, creating complex, ever-changing symbols, similar to those carved on the chamber walls beneath the church. "What is that?" Pastor Richards whispered, his voice barely audible over the continuing tolls of the bell. Olivia was recording everything on her phone, her historian's instincts overriding her fear. I think that's the tidal one." The water column had risen 30 feet above the harbor now, its form becoming more defined with each passing second. It wasn't simply water anymore, but something using water as its medium, a consciousness made visible, ancient and alien, and it was reacting to the bell. Each toll sent visible ripples through its form, disrupting the patterns within. The column twisted toward the church as if aware of the source of the sound that was disturbing it. "Keep ringing," Dr. Chen urged Chief Huang, who had momentarily faltered at the sight of the entity. He renewed his efforts, pulling the rope with grim determination. The floor beneath them groaned alarmingly, another beam cracking under the stress of the bell's movement and their combined weight. The entire tower swayed slightly with each toll. "The structural damage," Dr. Chen said, looking around worriedly. "The tower can't take much more of this." Below in the town, lights were coming on in houses as people woke, drawn by the continuous ringing. The townspeople at the harbor's edge were retreating from the water now, helping each other move away from the glowing whirlpool and the towering column at its center. But the tidal one wasn't retreating. Despite the bell's effect, it continued to rise and solidify, now nearly 50 feet tall. A sound began to emanate from it, not heard with ears but felt in the mind, a counterpoint to the bell's toll. Where the bell was clear and defined, this sound was chaotic and discordant, a jumble of frequencies that made Bee's thoughts scatter like startled birds. "It's fighting back," Olivia realized, checking the time on her phone. "It's 3:02 now, why isn't it retreating?" A terrible thought struck Bee. The journals. Did they ever mention how long the bell needed to ring? Olivia's eyes widened in realization. She quickly scrolled through the photos on her phone. Here, 1897. The bell must ring continuously for 5 minutes to fully break the influence cycle. But the tower, as if emphasizing her concern, another beam cracked beneath them, the floor tilting noticeably to one side. Chief Huang staggered but kept his grip on the rope, maintaining the rhythm of the tolls. "We won't last 5 minutes up here," Dr. Chen said, grabbing the wall for support. "The vibrations from the bell are accelerating the structural collapse." Pastor Richards moved to the rope, adding his strength to Chief Huang's. "We have to try." The water column in the harbor had begun to move, sliding across the surface toward the shore, toward the church. Its shape was constantly shifting, parts of it reaching out like enormous tentacles before being reabsorbed into the main mass. The symbols within it pulsed more rapidly, their glow intensifying. Another toll. Another crack in the tower's structure. The floor was now visibly sagging on one side. "We need to get down from here," Chief Huang shouted over the bell's reverberations. "It's going to collapse." "But the bell," Bee began. Her words were cut short by a sound from below. Another bell, smaller but with perfect clarity, ringing in harmony with the tower bell. Then another joined in, and another, their tones blending into a chord that seemed to physically push against the tidal one's mental noise. Bea rushed to the opening, looking down at the church grounds. There, emerging from a side door she hadn't noticed before, came Cooper, his clothes soaked and torn but his expression triumphant. Behind him, other figures appeared, elderly men and women, some whom Bea recognized from around town, others she'd never seen before. Each carried a bell, small handbells, dinner bells, antique school bells, and they rang them in perfect rhythm with the great bell in the tower. The keepers, Olivia breathed in wonder. They didn't disappear after all. Cooper looked up at the tower and waved urgently, pointing away from the bell chamber. His meaning was clear. Get down now, they didn't need to be told twice. With Chief Huang and Pastor Richards maintaining the bell's rhythm for a few moments longer, the others gathered what they could. Olivia's phone with the journal photos. The now silent crystal bowl, the journals themselves. Go, Chief Huang ordered, still pulling the rope. I'll be right behind you. Pastor Richards hesitated. We should stay together. No time to argue, the chief cut him off. Get down while you still can. Reluctantly, they began descending the winding stairs, the wood groaning beneath their feet. Above them, the bell continued to toll, each ring sending tremors through the weakened structure. They had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a massive crack echoed through the church, followed by the sound of splintering wood and crumbling stone. The upper portion of the bell tower was giving way. Chief, Bea shouted, turning back toward the stairs. But Chief Huang was already there, leaping down the last few steps as debris began to rain down from above. Run, he gasped, pushing them toward the main doors. They burst out into the storm to join Cooper and the other bell ringers on the church grounds. Behind them, with a sound like thunder, the bell tower partially collapsed in on itself. But miraculously, the bell remained hanging in what was left of the structure, continuing to ring as debris settled around it, its momentum carrying it back and forth. Cooper approached them, relief evident on his weathered face. The backup system, he explained, gesturing to his companions who continued ringing their smaller bells. My grandfather told me about it, but I never knew if it still existed. The old keepers maintained it in secret, passing down the knowledge from generation to generation just in case. Bea turned to look toward the harbor. The water column, the tidal one, had stopped advancing. It hovered at the edge of the town, its form fluctuating wildly as the combined tones of all the bells washed over it. The patterns within it were breaking apart, losing cohesion. Look, Dr. Chen said, pointing to the old man's companions. They're arranged in a specific pattern. Indeed. The bell ringers had positioned themselves in a formation that matched the symbols from the chamber walls, a pattern designed to amplify and direct the sound waves toward the harbor. For 5 full minutes, they maintained their positions, the small bells ringing in perfect harmony with the great bell that continued to swing in the partially collapsed tower. Rain soaked them all, but nobody moved. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the tidal one began to recede. The water column collapsed back into the harbor, the glow fading as the whirlpool slowed and dispersed. The discordant mental noise that had been fighting against the bells faded to nothing, leaving only the clean, clear tones ringing through the storm. Cooper lowered his bell first, the others following his lead. The great bell in the tower gave a few more diminishing tolls before finally going silent. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the sound of rain and distant thunder, Cooper turned to face them all. It's done. For now, Pastor Richards repeated. The old man nodded. It's never permanent. The tidal one sleeps but never dies. That's why the system was built, why the keepers have maintained their vigil for over 200 years. Olivia stepped forward, clutching the journals they'd rescued from the chamber. These contain everything, don't they? The complete history, the knowledge of what the tidal one is, how to contain it. Not everything, Cooper said. Some things were never written down, only passed from keeper to keeper through the generations. He looked around at his companions, the secret keepers who had maintained their vigil in silence for decades. But perhaps it's time for that to change. In the days that followed, as the town cleaned up from the storm and tried to make sense of what had happened, a new understanding began to form. The old church bell tower would need to be rebuilt, but this time with a modern mechanism designed by Dr. Chen, calibrated precisely to the tidal patterns predicted for the coming decades. The journals were carefully preserved and digitized by Olivia for the Historical Society, ensuring the knowledge wouldn't be lost again. The secret keepers, no longer needing to hide their purpose, shared what they knew with a select committee formed to maintain the bell system. Cooper supervised it all, finally able to fulfill his grandfather's legacy properly. "The Title I isn't evil," he explained to Bee as they watched workers beginning the tower reconstruction. "It's just different. A consciousness that evolved in the deep ocean, communicating through frequencies in water that happen to affect human minds. It doesn't mean to harm, it's simply trying to connect, to expand, to grow. But our minds can't handle its frequencies without being overwhelmed. So the bell disrupts those frequencies," Bee said, understanding now. "Like noise-canceling headphones?" Cooper nodded. "Exactly. And with rising sea levels, its reach is growing. The old methods won't be enough anymore. We need to adapt, just as it's adapting." A month later, the new bell tower was completed. Gleaming modern equipment now monitored tidal patterns continuously, automatically triggering the bell at precisely calculated intervals. But the old ways weren't entirely abandoned. The keepers still maintained their smaller bells, ready to step in if needed. And every night at 3 a.m., when the tide reached its critical point, the church bell tolled once, its sound rippling out across the water, maintaining the delicate balance between two worlds: the human world of solid ground and rational thought, and the fluid, ancient consciousness that dwelled in the deep. Bee often found herself awake at that hour, listening to the bell's toll and thinking about what lay beneath the waves, not with fear but with wonder at the mysteries still waiting to be understood, and with gratitude for those who had kept the watch through generations, ensuring the balance was maintained. The bell had always tolled alone at 3 a.m., but now, the town knew why, and the knowledge brought not fear, but a deeper connection to their history, their home, and the enduring relationship between land and sea that had shaped their community for centuries.